My friends, today I want to talk about two forces that have always defined the destiny of nations and the lives of people: hope and action. Hope is the spark that lights the path ahead. Action is the step we take upon it. One without the other is incomplete. Hope without action is a dream deferred. Action without hope is a road without direction. But together, hope and action have the power to transform despair into opportunity, fear into courage, and challenges into victories. We stand at a moment in history where cynicism is easy, where doubt is fashionable, and where fear is often louder than faith. Yet I believe that the challenges we face, whether in our communities, in our countries, or in our world, are not greater than our capacity to overcome them. Because when people dare to hope, and when they commit themselves to action, change is not only possible, it becomes inevitable. Hope is often misunderstood. Some people dismiss it as wishful thinking, as if it were nothing more than a comforting illusion. But real hope is something deeper. It is a discipline, a strength of spirit. It is the conviction that no matter how difficult our circumstances may be, tomorrow can still be brighter than today. It is not the denial of struggle, it is the belief that struggle is not the end of the story. Hope is what allows a parent working long hours to believe that their child's education will open doors that were closed to them. It is what pushes a student sitting late at night with a lamp on and a book in their hands to imagine that their ideas, their creativity, their talents might one day make a difference in the world. Hope is what strengthens a community when tragedy strikes, neighbors showing up with food, with shelter, with compassion, because they believe that healing is possible, that tomorrow can hold more than grief. And hope is not passive. It requires imagination and courage. To hope is to picture something better, even when the evidence around you says otherwise. It is to look at a broken system and still believe it can be repaired. It is to walk into a room filled with disagreement and still believe common ground can be found. Hope is the quiet refusal to accept that this is just the way things are. Time and again, history has shown us that hope is what keeps people moving forward when everything else tells them to give up. The marchers who faced fire hoses and dogs did not know whether justice would come in their lifetime, but they hoped. The workers who organized for fair wages and safer conditions did not know whether they would succeed, but they hoped. The nations torn by war and division did not know if reconciliation was possible, but they hoped. Without hope, despair sets in. Without hope, people turn inward, believing their efforts do not matter. And when that happens, progress stalls, injustice grows stronger, and fear becomes the loudest voice. But with hope, something changes. The impossible begins to feel possible. The distant begins to feel closer. People begin to act not only for themselves, but for those around them. That is the power of hope. It lifts us above the weight of the present moment. It pulls us toward the horizon of possibility, and it gives us the strength to endure until change arrives. Hope by itself can inspire us, but it is action that turns hope into something real. Action is the force that takes an idea out of the imagination and plants it in the soil of the world. It is the step forward, the hand extended, the voice raised, the work done day after day. Without action, hope remains only a dream, a promise never fulfilled. But when people choose to act, when they rise each morning determined to do their part, hope takes on flesh and bone, and the world begins to change. We know this from history. No school was ever built simply because someone hoped for education. It was built because people gathered materials, laid bricks, and sacrificed their own comfort so that children might sit in a classroom. No law was ever passed simply because people hoped for justice. It was passed because citizens marched, organized, voted, and demanded their voices be heard. No nation was ever lifted from despair simply because people wish for better days. It rose because people worked in factories, tilled the land, cared for the sick, and defended what they believed was right. Action does not always begin in the spotlight. Often it begins in small and unseen places. A mother who teaches her child to treat others with dignity takes an action that ripples into the wider world. A young man who spends his afternoon tutoring a neighbor's son is performing an act that can change a life. These are not grand gestures that make headlines, but they are the foundation of every movement that has ever mattered. When multiplied by millions, such small acts of courage and care can move the direction of an entire society, and action demands effort. It asks for sacrifice, for patience, for resilience in the face of setbacks. The truth is, progress is never a straight line. Every victory comes with setbacks. Every step forward is met with obstacles, but action insists that we keep going. It tells us to pick ourselves up when we fall, to try again when we fail, and to never allow disappointment to harden into surrender. There will always be critics who say change is impossible. There will always be doubters who scoff at those who try. But action is the answer to cynicism. When someone says nothing can be done, action proves them wrong. When someone says the problems are too big, action reminds us that no challenge has ever been greater than the human spirit when it refuses to quit. So when we speak of action, we are not only speaking emotion, we are speaking of purpose. We are speaking of the decision to take responsibility, to move beyond words and intentions, to shape the future rather than waiting for it to arrive. Action is the bridge that carries hope across the chasm of uncertainty into the land of possibility. Hope and action are powerful on their own, but they reach their full strength only when they are shared. When one person dares to hope, it can be dismissed as idealism. When one person acts alone, their efforts may seem too small to make a difference. But when people come together, when they share their hopes and join their actions, their collective strength can bend the course of history. Think of what happens when a community unites around a common cause. A single voice calling for justice can be silenced, but thousands of voices joined together cannot be ignored. A lone neighbor might struggle to clean a street, but when the entire block comes together, the work is finished in a single afternoon. A solitary teacher can change the life of one student, but when educators, families, and communities unite with a shared belief in the value of learning, entire generations are lifted. Unity is not about erasing our differences. It is about recognizing that what we share is greater than what divides us. Each of us carries our own story, our own background, our own set of experiences. But when we choose to focus on our common hopes for safety, for dignity, for opportunity, we begin to see ourselves not as strangers or competitors, but as allies in the work of building a better future. History tells us that division weakens us, but unity empowers us. The great struggles for freedom, for equality, for peace, were never won by a single hero. They were won because people who had little in common found common cause. Farmers and factory workers, men and women, young and old, all came together not because they were the same, but because they shared a vision larger than themselves. And in that unity, they discovered a strength they never knew they had. In our own lives, unity is what helps us endure. When tragedy strikes, it is the support of others that carries us through. When challenges overwhelm us, it is the encouragement of a friend, a colleague, a neighbor that keeps us moving forward. Alone, we may stumble, together we can rise. But unity is not automatic, it requires effort. It requires listening to those we disagree with. It requires the humility to see value in another person's perspective. And it requires the generosity to put aside selfishness for the sake of the greater good. Unity does not mean the absence of debate or disagreement. It means that even in disagreement, we remain committed to one another, committed to the belief that what unites us is stronger than what divides us. When people share their hopes and their actions, they create a current that carries everyone forward. What feels impossible alone becomes unstoppable together. And that is the promise of unity, that when we join our hands, when we lift our voices, when we align our steps, there is no mountain too high and no challenge too great. Every meaningful act of hope and every determined step of action will meet resistance. That has always been the way of the world. For every voice that says, yes, it can be done, there will be others who answer, no, it cannot. For every person who dares to dream, there will be others who stand ready to dismiss the dream as foolish or impossible. And so the question is not whether we will encounter doubt, it is whether we will summon the courage to keep moving in spite of it. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage is what rises within us when fear whispers in our ear, and still we move forward. It is the decision to take the step even when the ground ahead feels uncertain. It is the choice to stand tall when the weight of doubt presses down. Courage is the quiet strength of a young person who speaks up for what is right, even when they are the only one in the room. It is the resolve of a worker who challenges unfair treatment, knowing it may cost them dearly, but refusing to let injustice stand. There is always a temptation to give in to fear. Fear is easy. Fear tells us to stay where we are, to protect only ourselves, to avoid risk at all costs. But fear has never built a school. Fear has never healed a wound. Fear has never brought justice or peace or progress. Every advancement humanity has made, from the first voyages across oceans, to the struggles for freedom and equality, to the discoveries that cured diseases, was born not in fear, but in the courage of those who dared to try. And courage is not only for great moments in history, it belongs to ordinary life. It is found in the parent who works 2 jobs to keep food on the table. It is found in the student who continues studying even when the odds of success seem slim. It is found in the community that rebuilds after a disaster, or brick by brick refusing to surrender to despair. These are not acts that make headlines, but they are the lifeblood of progress. When we face doubt, courage insists we move anyway. When we face failure, courage tells us to rise again. When the path forward looks dark, courage lights a candle. And over time, those candles joined together become a beacon. They show others that it is possible to keep going, that fear does not have the final word, and that the human spirit cannot be broken. The truth is, courage does not eliminate fear, it transforms it. It takes the energy of fear and turns it into determination. It turns hesitation into resolve. It turns obstacles into challenges that can be overcome. And in the end, it is courage, not fear, that leaves its mark on history. Hope and action are never just about us here and now. They are about those who will come after us. Every generation inherits the world left behind by the one before, and every generation shapes the world that the next will live in. That is the unbroken chain of human history, each link connected to the other, each choice echoing far beyond its own moment. When we plant a seed, it is not for ourselves alone. It is for those who will one day sit beneath the shade of the tree. When we fight for justice, it is not only for our own freedom, it is for those who have yet to be born. When we invest in schools, in clean air, in safe neighborhoods, it is not just for our children, it is for their children and the children after them. That is the meaning of responsibility across generations, to understand that the future is not a distant idea, but a living reality shaped by what we do today. Think of the sacrifices of those who came before us. Many of them worked lives of hardship, often without seeing the full results of their struggle. They endured not for themselves, but for us. They believed that even if they would not stand in the promised land, their children might. They carried hope in their hearts and turned it into action through their hands, leaving behind a legacy that allowed us to dream bigger and live freer. Their courage is the reason we are here. Their choices are the foundation beneath our feet, and now the responsibility is ours. What will we leave behind? What story will the future tell about us? Will it say that we looked only to our own comfort and convenience? Or will it say that we lifted our eyes to see the generations ahead? Will it say that we squandered the gifts we were given? Or will it say that we built upon them and left behind something stronger, kinder, more just? It is tempting to think that the problems of today are enough to occupy us, that the debts of tomorrow can wait. But the truth is, every delay, every refusal to act becomes a burden that someone else must carry. And if we fail to shoulder our duty, that burden will grow heavier until it becomes unbearable for those who follow. Responsibility means refusing to pass that weight along. It means doing the hard work now so that the children of tomorrow can walk lighter, freer, stronger. Each of us carries that duty, whether we realize it or not. It is in the choices we make each day, how we treat others, how we care for our planet, how we build our communities, how we nurture the next generation. These choices may seem small in the moment, but across the sweep of time, they are what determine whether the world bends toward justice or drifts toward despair. So, when we speak of hope and action, we must remember they are not gifts we hold for ourselves alone. They are torches we carry for those who come after us. And it is our responsibility to keep that flame burning, to pass it forward, and to ensure that it lights the way for generations yet unseen. Too often we convince ourselves that change belongs to the powerful, to the wealthy, to the few who hold titles or sit in high offices. We tell ourselves that the problems of the world are too large for ordinary people to touch, that our voices are too small, our actions too insignificant to matter. But history teaches us a different lesson. Time and again, the course of nations has been altered not only by leaders, but by ordinary men and women who chose to act with extraordinary determination. It is the teacher in a crowded classroom who refuses to give up on a child that others have written off. It is the nurse who works through exhaustion, caring for patient after patient, because she knows that every life is precious. It is the worker who organizes with his colleagues, standing shoulder to shoulder for fair wages and dignity. These are not the faces carved into statues or printed in textbooks, but they are the people who keep the world turning, who, through quiet acts of persistence and compassion, create ripples that grow into waves. Change does not always announce itself with fanfare. It begins in living rooms, in church halls and union meetings, in small gatherings where neighbors come together to solve the problems of their community. A group of parents demanding better schools, a circle of volunteers determined to feed the hungry, a handful of citizens registering their neighbors to vote. These moments rarely make headlines, but they are the seeds of transformation. And when enough ordinary people commit to those acts of hope and action, those seeds blossom into movements that reshape entire societies. We must never forget that the power of ordinary people lies not in perfection, but in persistence. It lies in the decision to keep showing up, to keep lending a hand, to keep raising a voice, even when progress feels slow. Alone, each action may seem too small to matter, but together they accumulate, they gather force, they build momentum, and suddenly what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The world has never belonged solely to those who rule from palaces or offices. It has always belonged to those who build, who teach, who heal, who serve, who love. It has belonged to people who may never see their names in history books, but whose choices shape the lives of their families, their neighborhoods, their nations. That is the truth we must hold on to. Change is not reserved for the few. It belongs to all of us. And when ordinary people decide that their voices matter, when they join their hands in common purpose, they unleash a power greater than fear, greater than doubt, greater than the obstacles before them. That power, the power of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges, has always been and will always be the engine of progress. My friends, hope and action are not abstract ideas, they are choices. Choices we make every single day. Each of us decides whether to let despair dictate our lives or to hold fast to the belief that tomorrow can be better. Each of us decides whether to stand still and wait for someone else to act or to rise and take the first step ourselves. The truth is, the world will not change simply because we wish it so. It will change because ordinary people, bound together by hope and driven by action, refuse to surrender to cynicism. It will change because we do not accept that injustice is permanent or that hardship is inevitable or that progress is impossible. It will change because we will let it change through our courage, our sacrifice, our unity, and our persistence. So let us be the generation that chooses hope over fear, action over apathy, courage over doubt. Let us be the people who take the flame passed down to us and carry it higher so that it burns brighter for those who come after us. Let us remember that the future is not something that simply happens to us, it is something we create together. If we believe in that truth, if we hold fast to hope, if we act with determination, then no obstacle will be too great, no dream too distant, and no horizon beyond our reach. The time for hope is now. The time for action is now. And together, we can shape a future worthy of our highest ideals.